Let's talk about the maintenance of reels. Modern day reels are pretty tough. They don't take a whole lot of maintenance. It takes very minimal effort to take care of a reel. Heck, I know people have had the same reel for 6, 7 years in salt water and never done a single thing with it, except for rinse it a little bit when they get back. One thing, when you get back from fishing, if it's in fresh water, it's not a big deal. I do it, every once in a while. But in salt water every day, I soak my reel in water, or else just put it under a hose, warm water hose or warm water faucet, and do it. You should always look at the manufacturer's directions for what to do. If you take some reels apart like this and soak them, you're going to cause them some damage. Some reels, they're not designed to be taken apart, so you shouldn't be taking a spool off the housing. Make sure you look at I don't even want to go into all the different types of possibilities. So take a look at your reel, look at the manufacturer's suggestions, call the manufacturer if you need to, and find out how you're supposed to take care of that and clean that reel. Some things, though, that are just always the case. About once a year, I have my reels maintained, which means that inside you've got different gears. You've got maybe a drag system, especially if it's cork. It may need to be oiled a little bit. It should be cleaned, oiled, checked, tightened, loosened, whatever. And I have a guy that I know who does this quite often, and he's really good at it. He works at a local fly shop, and I just give him my reels. And for $15, $20 a piece, he takes care of my reels. The other thing you could do is send it back to the manufacturer and have them check your reel. If you're really handy and you've got a lot of mechanical prowess, then take care of your own reels, but find out from the manufacturer what their guidelines are for taking care of reels. The other thing you want to do is always loosen a drag when you get done fishing, especially if you have a cork drag. If you have a cork drag, if you leave it tight, it'll compress it and eventually ruin it. So I crank this back to almost zero and just let it spin. So at this point, this is zero, hardly any leverage on or drag on it at all. So bring it back there. Hey, whatever you do, don't drop your reel. I've ruined 2 reels in the last 35 years by dropping them, and if they hit, especially if they hit the spool in one of the places that's not protected, in other words, if you hit here, you're probably okay, but if that thing hits in one of these areas, man, if you sprain that, then it's not going to turn as well, and you're going to, it's just not set up right. So it's machined very carefully. A lot of these reels are just super machined. So don't drop your reel. The other thing, store it in a nice place. Store it someplace where, it's not going to be hot and not super hot. You're not going to get stuff smashing it. And one other thing I found over the course of time, you've got a couple of screws that hold the foot on, and you've got a screw that holds the handle on. And I've seen quite a few people lose both their handle and or have this thing start getting loose. And then, of course, you're out fishing, you don't have a screwdriver, and now you've got a loose foot. So I check my feet every once in a while, check those foot screws and check this, and just make sure they're good and tight before I go fishing. Especially if I'm going to take a long trip, if I'm going to go to some other country and I'm going to be gone for a while and I'm going to be in some backwoods camp, I want to make sure that these things are all tight to start with. You might even put a little bit of Loctite on them when you put them in there. So that's basically, reels are pretty simple. I wouldn't worry too much about reels. Just rinse them really good when you get done. Have them maintained once a year. Make sure that you don't drop them. And other than that, a reel is pretty simple. Taking care of fly lines is a bit more complicated than taking care of reels. It's not more complicated, it's just more time consuming. Just a couple of things on fly lines that I've seen ruin fly lines. One is people stepping on fly lines. Be careful when you're stripping that you're not walking on it, especially if it's on top of rocks. You see somebody strip down, they take a step, they put their foot on it, especially with a cleat, and all of a sudden they've got a ruined fly line. The other thing that's interestingly enough that'll ruin a fly line, if you have your leader, which you really can't see, especially your tippet, and you throw a nail knot in it or some kind of a weird knot, and it wraps around your fly line, I've seen that happen quite a bit. People yank on it. Well, this fly line or this leader will cut your fly line coating. And if it cuts your fly line coating, number one, you're going to get water inside in your core, or inside of here, and through capillary action, this is not going to float too well if it's a floating line. And number two, you've just put a big crack and cut all the way through your fly line, which is going to cause a little bit of it's probably not noticeable if it's small enough, but it's going to cause some kind of a hinging effect in there, and I just don't like having a cut up fly line. So be careful. If you've got a little bit of leader material wrapped around your fly line, don't just yank it to get it off. Take a pair of clippers and snip it just really gently. Put your clippers right up against the fly line, and then just gently cut that off, and you retie your leader if you need to. But I've seen a number of fly lines being destroyed that way. If you're taking good care of a fly line, and I guide, last year I guided about 87 days, 88 days, and there's a couple of rods I probably use those fly lines 50 or 60 times on the same rod, and they're still good. I might get another year out of them. So I could probably, we're talking about out in the sun, fishing 7 or 8 hours a day for 100, 110 days, but I take really good care of my fly lines. If you take good care of a fly line, you should easily, in normal kinds of fishing, get a season or two out of your fly line, maybe even longer. You might get 5 or 6 seasons out of your fly line. You may change just because you want to buy a different kind of fly line, but not because your fly line is ruined. When your fly line gets cracks in it, or it feels a little rough, or it doesn't shoot really good, it's either dirty or it's wearing out, one of the two. So let's talk about dirty, because you can do something about that. You can't do anything very much about a fly line that's wearing out. But if it's dirty, the first thing, there's a lot of commercial cleaners and so on the market. And one thing you can do, assuming you aren't at home and you have a dirty fly line out on the stream, and by the way, dirty fly lines, I hate them when I'm fishing with dry flies or nymphs and I want to do some mending, because a dirty fly line is floating lower in the water film than it would be if it's floating high, because it's nice and clean. So a fly line will float a lot better if it's clean. A lot of times people complain about the tip of their fly line sinking. I'll just take some silicone if I'm out on the river and I don't have time to wash it in warm water and so on and then re-grease it. Just take some silicone, the same kind of stuff you use for floating dry flies. Take that silicone and just rub it on the end of your fly line, and your fly line is going to float like the Queen Mary. So there are a number of different fly line cleaners on the market, and I'll put some of them up here. This happens to be a Climax Slick. This is a Scientific Angler fly line dressing. This is these are real Wonder pads or Wonder cloths. And you can see this happens to be one that I use when I'm guiding, and you can see the filth on that, and that's probably from 4 days of fishing. If you're fishing in a river with a lot of debris in it, or just even little particulates, those fly lines get pretty dirty. That's going to cause, when you rub one of these pads over your fly line, and what's going to happen is, if you see it that dirty, it's caused that fly line not to shoot as well, not to slide through the guides as well. It's also caused that fly line not to float as well. I prefer, there are a lot of shortcuts. People say, oh, you can use Amaral, you can use this, you can use that. You know what? One little bottle of this, so what, it costs you $6. It's going to last you 5 years. And it's made by a fly line manufacturer for a fly line. So I've used one of the products that the major manufacturers use for UV fly lines. That's what I'm going to use. So I'm not going to take my chances on using some other goofy thing. But it doesn't mean it won't work, and if you want to do that, you certainly can. One thing you want to do when you pull a fly one, you clean one, and let's just say we're out in the field and we stripped this off, we stripped off a bunch of line, and we want to clean this now. We're going to take this pad or a washcloth or something, and so I have one of these with me in my vest, and I'm just going to rub it this way. And I always rub away from the reel. Rub away from the reel towards the leader. The reason I do that, if you rub the other way, oftentimes you'll cause curls in the line. By rubbing it this way, it's like taking a garden hose and starting at the base and working it out. All the curls will come out. But if you don't do that, if you do it the other way, I tend to get curls in my line, and maybe that's just the way I do it. And you need to rub this pretty hard. You need to pull on it. So pull on it. If this is a saltwater line, I'll tell you one thing that happens with saltwater is especially I've seen it happen within 15 or 20 minutes, because you're fishing in saltwater conditions. It's super hot. There's fairly low humidity. man, you pull that out and all that salt water, it evaporates, and what's left? The salt. So the salt's on your line, and now it's hard. You can feel it's kind of sticky trying to get through your guides. The cleaner you keep that fly line, the easier it's going to shoot. And a lot of times you want that fly line to shoot really well because you're fishing for fish that are moving and you're doing quick casts. So keeping the fly line really clean is important. When you get home and you want to clean up a dirty fly line, what you do is you just take it and strip it into loose piles into a warm sink full of warm water with a little bit, you don't need a whole lot of soap, just a little bit, let it soak for maybe 20 minutes, a half an hour. And then rinse it really good, take it out, and what you can do is I usually leave it in a sink because if I take it out, I'll get it all tangled. Just leave it in a sink in the same configuration that it was when you put it in there, and just take it out and dry it with a nice cloth. And you know, you can rub it fairly hard, just get it good and dry, and don't worry about it. It's going to be hard to rub this too hard or squeeze it too hard when it's coming through. And again, I start at the top and work my way this way. So one of the things I do is make sure that when it comes out of the sink, it comes out the end of this end of the fly line, the leader end of the fly line first, which means you have to put it in like you would when you're clear casting on a quick cast. So I put it on the floor, strip it out, and then I strip it again back into the sink. So I strip it out on the floor and then strip this part, then will be the top part on the floor, the part closest to the backing. Then I take that and strip it into the sink. So when I get it all done into the sink, now I've got this. So when I decide to rinse it and come out and dry it, it's this. And I'll dry it all, make sure my floor is nice and clean, and dry it all. And then you take some kind of cleaner and you put it on there, especially if you've got something that allows you to, it dries a little bit and you've got time now to dry it, make it cure, and now you've got a really slick fly line. And I've seen a lot of times I go out to cast, and by cleaning my fly line, if I'm in some kind of a situation where I'm trying to cast long just for fun, me and my nephew are out there screwing around seeing who can cast the farthest, I can increase my cast by a good 10% by cleaning my fly line. So cleaning your fly line and getting it really slick is going to make a big difference in how it floats, how long it lasts, and how long it shoots. So try to do that. Then when you store it out of the light, store it out of the heat, put it in a cool, dark place, and you're good to go. And that fly line should last you a long time.